writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. In this episode, the Right Pack is going to discuss how they figure out their characters. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, voice actor slash voice talent, voiceover talent, I should say. Sorry, not voice talent. You never want to hear me sing, as we were discussing off mic.
Let's go with the riff off right now.
I wanted to do this.
I know. Kathleen wanted to hear me sing. Ain't gonna happen. No.
Can't
Not a
throw down.
chance.
I will throw back.
Songs of the 90s.
So anyway, voiceover talent, and I also write on the side. Plus, I'm also president of St. Louis Writers Guild. With me today is, if you didn't hear her already, the one who's begging me to do the reenactment of Exodus right out of the Bible, where I sing and the Jews all leave and running away, is my one and only lovely co-host.
A Christian, so I'll still be here being like, it wasn't as bad as in that show, man. You guys missed it. But, he challenged me, and I am all about that life. So, I'm Kathleen Kayembe, caller of challenges, and writer of such things as the short story The Fairy Tree, which you can find in Lightspeed Magazine at lightspeedmagazine.com. And the novelette You Will Always Have Family, a triptych, which you can find at nightmaremagazine.com. And we're in the future, so I have or have not finished NaNoWriMo. It is Schrodinger's Nano for me. And I may or may not have won. Good job or not.
You finished it regardless of whether or not you successfully finished it.
Yes.
It is officially now over.
Mm-hmm. I have finished Nano for this year, for 2017.
Yeah.
Just don't ask me in what capacity I finished.
And by the way, what are some recent announcements regarding your work? Because I'm really proud of a certain one.
So,
Proud of you for a certain one.
I take credit for the one that you earned that one time.
Oh, it's like my family. Anyway, so my novelette, You Will Always Have Family, a triptych, speaking of family, was put on the SFWA, the Science Fiction Writers of America, recommended reading list for this year. And my short story Fairy Tree might be appearing in a Best of 2017 Short Stories anthology. So we will see.
Congrats.
What?
Thank you.
Congratulations. My name is Chanel Achan. I write science fiction and fantasy type things, stuff, words. I'm sorry, my word count. It's still November. My word count is breaking my brain. Like Kathleen, I'm also attempting Nano. I'm not sure if finishing is a thing. Either way it goes, by the time this airs, the month will be over, so it doesn't matter.
My name's Rob Howell, and I also write fantasy and science fiction. I have a world that I've created, the world of Shiurin, and I'm recently released a short story in the Four Horsemen universe. I've got a number of projects that just recently got handed to me at HonorCon and at Constellation. And I can't talk about them yet, but I'm really excited about some of the things where my writing is going and some of the opportunities that have opened up to me recently.
Brad?
Cool. Brad R. Cook. I am the author of Steam Tree, which is out now, so do check it out. It is a middle grade. It is airships and dragons and climbing trees. Fun stuff like that. Do check it out. It has amazing illustrations in it from our own Jennifer Stolzer sitting over there.
Illustrating as we speak.
Yeah, who is illustrating as we speak, but not Steam Tree.
No, that's
no.
done.
Yes, that is done. But yeah, so check it out. You can find out all about Steam Tree and all of the magical swag that comes with Steam Tree at bradrcook.com.
I'm Melanie Lucas, not currently writing fantasy, but really I do have one and I will get back to it sometime after Thanksgiving, which, hey, it is after Thanksgiving, so maybe I am back to it.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah, if we didn't record in the past, we would never be able to meet on time. So, And also with us is the one and only Madame of Murder of the Right Pack. Yes, if you ever find our bodies, and we have died, obviously, you might want to check and make
She's
sure
the
he
murderer
wasn't
of the
involved.
right pack.
She's
Gotcha.
the murderer of the Right Pack.
Brad was looking real confused with your
Yeah. It's like, crap, do I need to run?
Yes, Brad, run now.
Grab your sword.
Oh, we have to run faster than Brad.
Exactly.
With his knees cut off.
It's only a flesh wound. Anyway.
I'm Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And I'm president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
Also with us is the Leonardo da Vinci herself.
You can buy my work for the budget of a small country. Leonardo da Vinci.
I know.
Topical humor. My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My fantasy book, Threadcaster, is for sale on Amazon. Check it out for young adults, fantasy fans. I'm illustrating many projects that we're getting started in 2018, so I'll be announcing those at some point in the future. I also do book covers and all sorts of other things, so check me out at jenniferstolzer.com.
And our man who comes to us via the web. The one, the only.
I'm Ryan P. Freeman, and I write fantasy. I am currently in Hannibal, Missouri, so Mark Twain territory. I have 3 books currently out, and at the time this is airing, I should hopefully have the manuscript for another book, The Last Circle, done. So fingers crossed. Real time? I don't know how that works. Anyways, you can find more about me at ryanpfreeman.com. I'm also a
New
author.
nickname.
Yeah. I was trying to sound all fancy like you guys. And I'm completely thrown off. I do broadcasting for radio, and happy to be here.
Excellent. And today we're going to talk about figuring out your characters. To me, I think this is going to be one of my favorite episodes because, as Melanie likes to point out, I may not like to plot my stories, but I plot out my characters. So, I'm going to ask you, to ask everybody here, because there's no 2 writers that ever do the same way. How do you figure out your characters? And let me caveat this. You may figure them out before you start writing. You may figure them out as you're writing. Or you might have finally figured them out after you hit the last period on the first draft and go, oh, so that's what that guy was like. So with that said, I've got Kathleen almost jumping off the chair, so go for it, Kathleen.
D, all of the above.
All of the above. So, tell me about that. Tell me how do you start? Where does it start for you?
How do you feel about your mother?
Well, it's a lecture complex for girls, right? No, I do miss Lee. I was going to make such a dirty joke. But anyway, so for getting to know characters, I generally start with a decent enough idea of the point of view character that I can start writing from their perspective. And I get to know them better as the story goes on. And after the story's done, I go back and I read the whole thing and I get a better feel for who they are over the course of everything. And then I go back and revise because I have a better idea of the whole shape of the story and who the character is. And I can add things to the beginning that I know now that I didn't know as I was writing them at the time.
Gotcha. Ryan and then Fedora. Ryan.
I like to start just by writing, and as I write, I get to know them. However, the time that I wrote my novella, The Great Isle Tale, is the only time so far, knock on wood, that the characters leapt out and told me who they were going to be, and then just insisted on being themselves. So I know it kind of sounds magical, and it kind of was, and it hasn't happened yet again. But I either write and figure out who they are as I go, or they tell me who they are.
Okay, Fedora, then Brad, then Jen, and then Rob.
I know a number of writers who have an entire list of things, and they fill out a questionnaire about each of their characters.
No one over on the couch does that.
But
I
I have something a lot simpler. I have just a little 3-point thing that I like to try to do, and that is give them a past, give them a future, and give them a struggle. If you can do all of those things, I believe you have a character.
Brad, Jen, and then me. Oh no, I'm sorry, Rob, and then me. Sorry.
Denied.
I have been denied.
Well, I think important to mention is fluidity, that your characters will change.
Yes.
Even I, who plots, and everyone knows I'm a big plotting kind of guy, so I start off plotting all my characters out and the relationships that I want to have them have and what's important in their lives and all of that kind of stuff, and I guarantee you, somewhere in the book, something of all of that will change. Because, character has to change in certain ways, or you're like, that's a really cool subplot, let's focus on that, and now you've got to change your character a little more there. So I love the idea of Kathleen's comment about fluidity, simply because it is so important to remember that your characters will change.
Jen?
Character is my favorite topic. And so, that being said, our diligent listeners probably already know all my answers about characters. My character, I have to, I'm also a plotter. I can't start writing until I know who everyone is and at least the basics of like where they're coming from, and a lot of that is organic. And I hone that by using my other skill, which is drawing pictures of them. I draw pictures of my characters. Everyone gets at least a few pages of outlines, and once I get to look them in the eyes and I see their face, there's something in my heart that just clicks, and I'm like, oh wait, yes, that's who you are. I know you, and giving them that sort of identity visibly in my brain lets them experience the story well. So I draw pictures of them. I don't do the quizzes or whatever because I feel like they're alive at that point.
Yeah. When we get to me on this circle, I'm glad you brought up about pictures, but I'm going to come back to that. Go for it. Kathleen's got a dovetail and then over to Rob.
I am not
dovetail?
an artist
Okay.
because I am not that talented or lucky, and that's my lot in life. However, I am a writer, and something that I do that I think is akin to your drawing pictures to kind of figure out character better is I will write shorts about the character and their backstory and bits of that. Or short stories that are like 6,000 words of my nano about backstory issues that are important or ways that the story could go depending on how the character is. So I never thought about it as similar to your drawing pictures, but I do that. Basically make sketches, but with words.
Rob? Oh, sorry, you had a dovetail, didn't you?
I did.
Sorry, Chanel and then Rob.
Sorry.
No worries.
So like these wonderful ladies over here, I kind of have to get a sense of my characters, in a what's the word? I don't draw them. If I have the chance to look up images of people that look like them, I get really stalkerish about it. It's a little creepy.
I think a lot of people do that.
I used to do that. Not the stalking part.
There's a particular woman that I found a random picture of, and I'm like, her. And now there's like pictures of her plastered everywhere, and I'm pretty sure that's like serial killer-esque, but I don't care. But for me, I have to, to start figuring out my character, it starts when the writing starts, because I don't plot. I don't plot, I can't plot, I lose magic when I plot. It's like the steam just goes out and I can't recover it. So I find a lot of it as I'm writing, but the moment for me when it clicks, when the character is suddenly locked in and I'm like, yes, this person is a person to me, is I have to know what's important to them. Mm-hmm. Like I have to know, like, okay, this person cares about X, because that's going to inform pretty much, at least in that little slice of their world, it's going to inform it entirely. So I have to know what they care about in order to make them real to me. Until then, they're just kind of like little Lego figures that I move around and throw in the air and then step on them and scream and curse and whatever. But yeah, I have to know what's important to them.
Rob?
One of the things I'm going to just start this off is there's one true way of writing, and it's whatever works for you.
Amen to that.
And the thing I want to emphasize, where I want to go with that is that Jennifer uses her skills as an artist, and Kathleen uses her skills as a short story writer. I use my skill. My first passion was theater. My first passion was learning how to act. So what I do to create is enough information that when I come up to the character in the novel, I'm doing what you're talking about, what Ryan talked about letting the character come to life. And one of the interesting techniques that helps me do this, it sounds stupid, but Wikipedia has a random article function. It's got a button there, you just click on it and it pops up a random article. And the article could be on a protein or a particular DNA sequence or something like that. And probably not useful, but it can be on everything. And so one of the things to do is to keep clicking on it until I see something interesting. In this particular case, I'll look for people. And they're people that I've never heard of before quite often, and they'll often have some sort of quirky or interesting bit. It'll also have an image that I can look in their eyes that you guys were talking about as well. And I'll just scribble some stuff down or cut and paste into a Word file that I've got of that sort of thing. And then as I come up to I need a new character or something like that, I'll just kind of glance at this stuff that I would never have normally thought of on my own. I just will have gone and found these little snippets of some sort of odd behavior or interesting tidbit, and I'll pull that and put that in, and all of a sudden I've got, from an actor's perspective, enough of a start that the character then can flow along.
That is so neat.
I should totally do that.
Right?
Yeah. I'll sit and watch sporting events. I watch a lot of sports, and so sports are so, periodic. I mean, you have to have play happen and something like that. I'll click the button, I'll glance at it, the next play will happen, I will then click it, do cut and paste into the Word document, and then I have these Word documents of people and places and events and things that I think are interesting, and I horse races that have ended up with feuds and places that have old copper mines that have expired but have Roman aqueducts that have fallen into disrepair because that's how they mine them. And it's just these little tidbits of all these cities and people and places and things that I just think are neat to create a realism to the world. And it's just Wikipedia, random article, random article, random article.
That is the most useful purpose for commercials I can think of, fast forwarding through them. What I thought you were going to say when you mentioned theater was when I was at Clarion in 2016, we had a woman from the theater come in and run us through some exercises to kind of embody our characters more. And it's not something that I, as a person who is a disembodied head with stuff that goes on underneath, would ever have thought to do. But it was super helpful. Like, she had us close our eyes so we weren't, and she started us at our feet, got us all the way through our hips to the tips of our heads and our fingertips. And then she had us go into a pose that was the character as they are inside. Mm-hmm. And then go into a pose as the character projects to the world. And they were very different for this character, and I would not have thought of any of them. I also would not have understood that he would man spread, but he would. And if I hadn't done that exercise, I would have had him just sit down in a chair. But no, he would spread all over the place because he's that kind of guy. It was illuminating. Thank you, theater. Thank you.
Okay, now I guess Chanel with a dovetail. Brad, do you have dovetail too? Okay, Chanel then.
Another thing that I tend to do, dance background here, woot woot. How does your character move is something that I think, how people move through space is very telling. Are they bumping into a lot of things? Are they very decisive with their movements? Are they sort of aimlessly wandering about? That is very, very telling. It also helps on descriptions a lot, but it's something to consider. Not just the poses of the characters' internal versus external lives, but how they actually carry themselves in space.
Extremely quick dovetail in animation. The first thing you do with any character is a walk cycle. Because everyone walks different, and that's the exact reason why you start with a walk cycle. Your character, even if your character is never intended to walk on the cartoon, if you're designing a character, you put a walk cycle in because how they carry themselves when they move is a lot of who they are as a person. So it helps you animate the rest of their movements more consistently because you've got this walk cycle to refer to, and you're like, oh, he's really bouncy. So he'll move bouncily in future actions. Or he's moving real slow and his arms are hanging down and he's got bad posture. We'll make sure he keeps that sort of posture and just have it all feel like the same person. So that ties into that.
Brad, and then me?
Yeah, so one of the biggest ways I create, and I actually use a lot of the techniques you guys are talking about, coming out of the theater, Those kinds of theater exercises to get into your character, I love them. And I don't use them per se as much as I might for some things, but it's created a mindset in me that I think about these kinds of things when I'm creating characters. So the first thing I do when I'm plotting out the book is come up with the main character that I want to tell, because that's going to influence the entire rest of the story I'm telling. That character creation is incredibly specific towards the book I'm writing, and can come out of a lot. It's about your main character. They have to be incredibly well-rounded in terms of their depth. They have to be not just a service character, they have to have background. So that is one thing, but the other characters in your novel is what I wanted to touch on. Your side characters, your villains, your love interests, all that kind of stuff. For those characters, that is something very different in terms of creation for me. A lot of those are situational, so you'll be in a situation, the character has to relate to that situation. So a lot of times your characters that you're going to create have built-in characteristics into them already. So I start with that. Out of that, though, comes, what is it that I want this person, like, what is it that I want the reader to get out of this character? Because that is probably the most important thing that I need to know about that character moving forward. The rest of it I can use to showcase that. Because if I want the reader to love this character, then I have to make certain this character is doing things that make them lovable, that they're shown in certain lights, all of that kind of stuff. And through that, and then for me, it's the belief that every character, has came from somewhere. So where did they come from? And by knowing that tells me a lot. If they've come from a small fishing village, that's going to affect their outlook as to whether or not they're from a big city. And so by knowing all of these kinds of things, I'm starting to kind of get into that. And then honestly, when it really breaks down to it and I need, how would this person react or something along those lines, and if it's not something I'm used to, one of the things I love to do is actually go to their zodiac sign. And not because I'm like, oh, they're a Sagittarius, I need to know this. It's because the astrology has broken out 12 different, or 13, depending on what sign of astrology you follow. But, it's broken out these different personality traits and how those personality traits interact with other personality traits. And that can be a beautiful, useful tool to understanding how your character is going to think and feel, and how other characters are going to think and feel, and how they're all going to interact and relate to each other. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be precise that they are a Sagittarius, so they go this way. But it's a nice basis, and it gives you a nice place to go from.
Well, okay, and Brad, it's interesting you said that, because I'm going to talk about the way I do it. And a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I actually was looking at the astronomy part. That was until I had a master's degree class, and that class, and I took a few more classes on it, and it was on psychology of leadership, because I discovered something, and it has taken me beyond that. So when I create my characters, Melanie has jokingly chided me, but I plot my characters out. And I do a couple different things. Yes, I do role-playing game stuff to create my characters. And I'll explain why in a minute. But I also start off, after I figure out what's my story, what kind of story am I trying to tell. And while I write my story is very Freudian, the way I create my characters is very Jungian. And what I'm talking about is using Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs was based upon Carl Jung's personality concepts. I'm not getting quite exact how to describe it, but what it is Myers-Briggs breaks out our personalities, and we are fluid as human beings, even every day. So one of the things I learned about this is you have a work personality and you have a home personality. I'll use myself as an example after I explain the personalities. There are 16 different personalities, actually more. I might have my numbers wrong, but anyway, each personality is made up of 4 dichotomies. Extroverted versus introverted. Sensing versus intuition. Thinking versus feeling. Judgment versus perception. Or, I'm sorry everybody, I'm going to pick on you if you have a P in your personality type and you know this, procrastination.
You know what? Fight me.
That's not.
I'll go and fight you later. My ex-wife was a P.
That's not what it stands for.
It stands for perception. But what it is, the difference is let's break this down and then I'll go explain what mine are and then how I use this for my characters. Extrovert versus introvert. This is the way you have basically how you interact with the world. How do you collect your information? Are you extrovert or introverted? Thinking, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Sensing versus intuition. How do you take in your data? Are you relying on your five senses or do you rely on your intuition? And by the way, there is a scale in between these as I'm going through. Thinking versus feeling. Point blank. Do you use your more logical side or do you use more your emotional side when you make your decisions? Very simple. Judgment versus what I just got myself in trouble with across the way. Perception. Judgment means you make decisions quickly. You don't need the last little bit of data to make your decision. Perceptions, they will try to wait until that last little piece of data comes in before they make their decision. Now, time does run against that, which I love watching somebody who has a P in their personality type, and the clock is ticking, and you see them just stressing because they know there's one more piece of data out there before they make their decision. Whereas I've already made a decision, but hey, I may not have had all the data. I can make a bad decision easily. Personally, when I'm at home, I am an INTJ. Introvert, intuition, thinking, judgmental. And despite all the science that I love, my intuition knocks it out of the ballpark. I'm as far over on the intuition scale as you can get. Introvert versus extrovert is a different story. I'm a very low introvert. If you ever get into a scale, 0 is literally the balance point. The extreme, as I said, intuition, is 42. Somewhere in the 40s, 50s. I am an I6. So my work personality is not a surprise. I'm an ENTJ. I'm extroverted in a work environment. I'm an introvert when I'm more in relaxed and home. It's how you act and how you perform. It's not. I'm really an introvert in real life. I just appear, and the way I act as an extrovert. Go ahead, and then I will continue.
Oh, that reminds me, like I said, of the theater exercise. There's who the character is inside, and then there's what they present when they're out in the world.
Exactly. And that is exact. And then from that dichotomy, those 4 simple letters, there's information out there about what are their goals. Fedora talked a little while ago about having the conflict. Give them a past, give them a future, give them a conflict. The past by past and future with those characters are kind of created with that. There's another element that I haven't tossed in here, and that's the role-playing game. That's still coming. But what I do is I look at their past and go, okay, if I am an INTJ, or let's say I'm an ESFP, that's complete opposite. How did that person grow up? What kind of future are they looking for? But more importantly, where's their conflict? What kind of decision making are they doing? What's their personality like based on that? And what do they want? What is their proverbial superpower, if you will? In fact, I can look that up because I've collected all this stuff over time. And I'm slow the computer here as it pops up as I'm talking. Okay, that's one element that I do. Then role-playing, if you've ever heard of alignment, I do that. Because I do that is I'm looking at 2 of the dichotomies. What is their role? How do they picture themselves in the world between the role of law and chaos, or if you will, law and order or anarchy, and how they pitch themselves between good and evil. And wherever they're at in that helps me figure out what they're doing. Then, with that, beyond that, I give them skills. The skills are to prevent me from creating godlike characters, like James Bond. Suddenly, James Bond can pick a lock and do everything possible and seduce every single woman that's out there. Not likely to happen.
No, they're lesbians.
Right. Oh no, James Bond's able to convert to a lesbian in his style.
Oh, that's fiction.
That is complete fiction. I go with that. I'm just
That's
saying.
gonna enrage the people.
I'm just going down
Don't
that
write
road.
You
So
will get
I
flames.
mentioned superpowers. I was looking this up on the computer, finally pulled it up. For ESFPs, it's supposed to be flying. They are fun-loving and excitable. They enjoy being the life of the party, and what better party trick than being able to fly? So knowing that, okay, they're life of the party. That tells me how they're going to act around people, what their general idealization is. So Myers-Briggs meets alignment meets skills. That's how I create my characters, and then I build from there. And yes, they're fluid. They can easily be changed. Yes.
Okay, I'm asking you this, but I'm asking everybody this too.
Mhm.
We all get into our characters in different ways,
Yes.
but things that I love about my characters is that they don't know themselves as well as I know them. I have a character in my nano novel that Chanel wants to shake violently.
Ooh, Jesus.
Because he thinks some things and he really believes these things are true,
And he's so wrong.
Mhm. So
That's
I have let the reader know that he is wrong. So what do you do in situations where you have characters that, like, you know they're wrong about something and you want the reader to know they're wrong and you want the reader to know them as well as you do, but you don't want the character to know themselves as well?
That goes through a lot of motivations.
Yeah.
So.
That goes toward that. That's why I've got the Myers-Briggs aspect to their personality, how they see the world, and how they interact. Go ahead.
So, I think this gets into.
You
I'm dovetailing.
Okay, you dovetail now. Okay, and you dovetail.
So,
So you.
okay. So, how I get into characters and get into that aspect specifically is, especially if it's my point of view character that doesn't know themselves, it's mostly through other people's reaction to them, which is really hard in this particular case. I set myself a challenge. It's not going too well, by the way. But I have a character who is telepathic. And I want her to be, obviously she's telepathic, so she knows other people, but she is very blind and missing certain, not seeing certain things and completely missing a few obvious details. Basically, because she's telepathic, she over-relies on it, and it actually, her power cripples her in certain ways because she spends so much time trying to keep out other people's thoughts. She's not very good at actually predicting what other people are feeling. But point is, my goal is for the reader to figure out this other character is in love with her before she figures it out. And that has to happen through dialogue and other people's behavior around her. And it's a real challenge because not only I have a way for her not to actually feel it. That's actually completely explained. The issue is, can I subtly indicate that through dialogue and through people's subtle physical reactions?
Yes, you can.
Yes, but can I? That's an issue.
Yes, you can.
But that's practice.
Yes, which is why I'm trying to write it.
Fedora.
I think we have to make a distinction between main characters and lesser characters, secondary characters, some of whom you can get away with making stereotypes even because they are just little walk-ons to do some important but tiny bit of business. But with your main characters, which is what we've mostly been trying to talk about, I think, the key, as far as I'm concerned, is to give them strengths and weaknesses, to make them multi-dimensional, so that while with your protagonist the strengths have to outweigh the weaknesses, and with the villains it's the opposite, then everybody else sort of falls in being a lesser or supportive role as a character. But having key strengths and key weaknesses is important. And also important is not imitating people. You were making fun of James Bond. Don't make another James Bond. You're not going to do it better than he did, for one thing. And we're all fed up with the macho cowboy type, and we're fed up with the hard-boiled detective who drinks too much from the 50s. Get some new strengths and weaknesses.
Jane Bond.
Jane Bond, thank you.
Atomic Blonde.
Yes.
Well, a lot of this starts with remembering that every character is the hero in their own novel. And once you start that, it doesn't matter how evil or bad or wrong the character is. You have to write them trying to succeed at what their goals are. And just because they are the villain, the stronger you make the villain, the better you make the challenge for your main hero and the better your story is. Obviously, I do a lot of that through going in and acting out the part as I'm writing the thing. But however you do it, you have to give that character the chance to succeed. Another thing that you guys are all talking about that I want to phrase a little bit more explicitly, we build characters sort of like, or I build characters sort of like Legos. I start with a couple of things, a couple of adjectives or something like that, and then as the character starts becoming more and more important, I'll start adding more blocks to it. And one of the useful things you can do with this is that as I wrote my first novel, and I had random characters, I would put no more than 2 or 3 adjectives about just about every character. You walk up, you have something about them. Usually the first time you see them, it's something external, their hair color, their eye color, or the way they move, or something like that. The great thing about this, though, is that you've started a potential treasure trove of characters. And then maybe the next time you need a character that does X, Y, and Z, you don't create a new one. You go back to the character you met in one particular place or something like that. And then you're starting to build numbers of connections, and especially if you're in a city or in a fairly compact level of population, you're going to get those kinds of connections because that's what we do, the way we live in places like that. So start small, even if it's going to be your biggest character, start small, add tidbits as you go, and suddenly they start expanding and growing up on their own.
Kathleen and then Ryan?
So I want to pull threads from 3 of you, like a spider. So Fedora mentioned side characters. Brad mentioned side characters briefly, and Rob mentioned interactions with other people. And I've been playing the Ace Attorney game series, and something that the game does very well is character. You know so much about the main characters, and I was chatting with other fans, and the reason we know them so well is because we see them interact with all sorts of different kinds of characters, all sorts of side characters. So those side characters can be like zany and quirky and off the wall in different ways, but the ways that the main characters, the point of view characters, react tell you a lot about who they are and how they feel about various things. And like, I'm writing a novel that's 7 characters for the most part. Side characters keep slipping in who are off screen, but like the side characters and the characters that the 2 main characters are dealing with on a daily basis are telling me a lot more about these main characters than I would know about them if I were just writing, this is what they like to eat, this is what blah. That stuff doesn't work for me. But like having them interact with someone who is riding a shopping cart through a grocery store tells me a lot about these characters. Like which ones are trying to wrangle everyone and which ones are trying to like, let's just let them go. We will go that way. We will get the rest of our stuff and get out. Like who does what in these situations?
Well, I'm not sure which was first, so Brad or Howell? Brad or Rob?
Just to throw this out real quick, to answer your question, or not really answer it, but to kind of tack onto it. Yeah, I think this is kind of a huge thing, and I think really it comes in from how we interact with people in our regular lives. So if I'm the main character of my own novel, then I have a satellite group of people around me, family and friends, they represent an inner core of people that I interact with in a certain way on a regular basis. Beyond that, there are then, acquaintances and other people who, the guy who works in that store that I go into all the time that I talk to occasionally. And, through interactions with that person, you're going to learn more about me. And so in a novel, for me, it's the same way. That I have, and oddly enough, since Iron Horseman and since the Iron Chronicles and Steam Tree are both steampunk, I have my main character. He is surrounded by a crew, an airship crew, that he interacts with on a regular basis. He has family that interacts with, and so you get to learn this kinds of stuff. One of the things I wanted to touch on is that notion of the side character that keeps reappearing that Rob mentioned. I am a huge fan of this. Because, yes, I will have the throwaway character that you will never see again. It has to happen. It's a big part of life. But I love, and in almost every book I try to, find those characters that I can reoccur so that, if this gets made into a movie, some character actor is probably going to end up playing that character because, they show up a lot and they're cool and everything like that. But it really, beyond giving you a larger cast in your novels, I mean, if you think of Harry Potter and the entire just huge amount of characters that are in that. So you're adding to that character base, but what you're also doing is you're allowing people to see interactions over time, which the way I relate to people, my friends, when I see them over time, that's going to be one thing that I do. The way I relate to people that I meet on an acquaintance basis or in kind of a tertiary thing every day is going to be something completely different. But every time I have an interaction with that person, you're going to learn something else about me, and you're going to learn something else about that character. And over time, that's a really beautiful way of showing who these characters are.
Okay. Rob, were you dovetailing to?
Both of them, actually.
Okay, then Rob and then Kathleen, because you're dovetailing.
My dovetail with you is what you just said before he was really good. The one practical thing I just want to emphasize to the people who are listening is remember that you want to show this, not tell it. Exposition is the devil. Have them do things to show it, not, well, he is this. Well, that's nice. Show him doing it. The second thing is back to what Brad was talking about, who was on the whole secondary character thing. Another practical thing, if you haven't started a Bible for your world, you should start a Bible for your world now. Yes. The more you keep track of your characters in your books, the small ones especially, the more tools you have at your disposal. The same true of places and locations and all of that.
In fact, this just came back to bite me in the butt because I hadn't done it and I screwed up somebody's hair.
Yeah, and not only does it protect you against the exact sort of thing, it adds you more options later for what you can do with those.
So let's pretend I wasn't in the character Bible and show Bible episode. What is this Bible of which you speak, and does it have commandments?
It does have commandments. A Bible is the term for basically writing down all of the specific things that you've created. A character, his or her name, the descriptions that you've used in the book, like for example the hair, or any ways of movement or eye color or any of those sorts of things, so that when you talk about David wearing a Star Wars t-shirt all the time, next time you have him in a scene, he's wearing a different Star Wars shirt. Or something along those lines, so that your characters have the consistency that doesn't throw your readers out of the suspension of disbelief. Mm-hmm. The commandment is you can't ever keep up, but you can't ever stop trying, and write as much of it down that's specific. One of the things I do for mine is I'll cut and paste out the introductory scene for almost every character and just put it there. And I don't edit it. I just say, okay, I go back. And then also, when I do that, I footnote the page.
The page, yes.
So that I can go back and find that character and see the rest of it. Because I know I'm going to screw it up. Also, there's the find feature in Word that helps too. But if you have the Bible, you can do that much faster. I did it with a wiki in my world. I built an entire wiki that I update as I write the novels, that I link to everywhere in my that and it saved my butt. It also makes it helpful for my editor to go look up characters and say, Rob, you should look up this character because you screwed it up. Yes, dear.
I would add one thing to that. Also, check your Bible when you're using the character again.
Yep.
Because I have spelled the same person's name more than
Yes.
one way, and my editor caught it. Thank goodness they caught it. But
There's a character
It's so
that I
easy to
always
do
struggle with. Her name is Branamira. And to me, I pronounce it Branamira, except it's spelled slightly differently because that's the way I put it down. I put it down one way and I always misspell it. I always have to go back just exactly like what
so
you're talking
check
about.
your Bible.
Check your spellings.
I would add a commandment that thou is not allowed to break one's own Bible. Because if you do, then instantly I'm going to hate you for it. So please don't do that. If you've said it in book 1, it must be that way in book 3.
And before
It means your writer credibility takes a hit.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
before Kathleen dovetails in real fast, I just want to remind the audience that if you look back at the past Right Pack videos or podcasts, you will find an entire episode dedicated to the Story Bible. Go check it out.
So, what I wanted to dovetail with Brad about, just rewind a little bit. So, Brad was mentioning how characters, just like people, which characters are based on, people are complex enough that they interact with certain groups differently. So you react one way around your family to a given thing, you act a different way around your closest friends, you react differently around acquaintances, you react differently around at your work. I know because I can act very professional around people I want to slap like children who are horrible and need to go sit somewhere at work. They will think I think they're the best. Unfortunate.
Anyone who's worked retail has a retail face.
Yes,
Yeah.
like just like business face.
Mask. The
Business face. You are acting like a child, but business face.
Yes.
So I wanted to give a term to that. That's code switching. So when you act or one way around one group and act a different way around a different group, you're code switching, and we all do it.
With varying levels of success.
With varying levels of success and to varying degrees depending on who the group is. Yeah.
And that's why I use Myers-Briggs. I talked about before. I'm just saying, point blank, that's why I use it.
You can also take Facebook or BuzzFeed quizzes as your
As your character.
Yes.
Those are that. I tried that. That was kind of fun. Over there and then there.
Oh, speaking of quizzes, I know when I'm looking at the world and thinking things that my characters would think, I'm in it. Like Chanel, I mentioned to her because we live at the same place, and Chanel said something, and I nearly called back to her something extremely vulgar, and I was like, "What? Oh, this is what happens when you write characters who think like this."
I wish you would have done it.
I was so mad. Like, I watch my language. I watch it very closely. And, like, these characters are just breaking my brain with some things. And it's awful and wonderful, but awful.
It's great to watch.
And Kathleen, you had your hand up. I can't tell. Was reservation or
Yes.
dovetail? Okay,
So-
I've got dovetail here.
This is real quick, actually. Back to David's role-playing thing. There was a game called Rollmaster in the 1980s. And one of the fascinating things about that game was it was incredibly detailed. It had charts for everything in existence. Brilliantly, from our perspective, it had charts for all sorts of emotions, characteristics, and things like that. If you can't come up with something, find a chart like that. Find a role-playing chart, and they're out there on the internet now, and just roll some things up. What the heck? You're creating a character. Maybe it's something intriguing.
Over to Kathleen and then to Brian.
So I was hoping, actually, David, that you look up another Right Pack episode.
Go for it.
We did an episode on the Batman Begins film and the way characterization works in that. And that episode drew a lot from John Truby's book, The Anatomy of Story. And one of the things he says to do is to kind of make every other character, all the supporting characters to your main character, represent a way of life that your character has rejected. And
The Christopher Nolan episode.
Yes.
there we go.
on ring theory.
Oh yeah.
So that's been interesting. John Truby suggests having your main character and everybody else is an antagonist. Like, especially if it's a romance, the love interest is an antagonist because they have to challenge your main character and bring out who they really are. So I've been doing that, and it's kind of fun in the novel I'm writing for Nano.
Yep, that was the title of that episode is Story Structure and Christopher Nolan. And I thought we did a separate one for Ring Theory.
I thought we did a
We
different
did,
one.
but it was part of that.
Yeah. But something that's been really helpful for me as far as writing character and getting to know character is when Chanel mentioned what's important to that person, that's been key. And also when David says, what does that person want? And John Truby's advice was having what that person wants be at odds with what that person needs. So what's making me very happy in the novel I'm writing is that what the character wants is completely wrong for him. And he's going to have to make some hard choices. And it's going to be great.
I divorced her. Well, she divorced me.
They're too young for that.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they're adults. Ooh. Oh, I hope they don't get married.
Yeah,
Not right now.
The other episode is Ring Theory of Storytelling.
Oh,
Okay.
like ever.
Again, that was Ring Theory of Storytelling, and Christopher Nolan.
It's the Christopher Nolan one that you're
Story
referring
Structure
to.
and Christopher Nolan.
Because that's the one where we go into the characters, the way Nolan structures
The
his
4-point
villains.
things.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was cool.
Ryan.
One of the things I've done to help form characters as I'm writing is to think of society. If I'm in a village, if I'm dealing with an army, I like to, like for example, in Grey Isle Tale, I have a character who's a general, except because they're Latin based, I don't call him a general, I call him a legate. Or just, it's an example. But think about people that you've met in different places around town, you know? And then as you're writing a story, think about, okay, if he was a grocer, okay, who's the last grocer I remember? And then make them like them. And it's great because in Hannibal, in my neck of the woods, I'm sure everywhere, there's a lot of characters. There's a lot of like, are you a real person? Like, really? Like, okay, all right, you're gonna go in print. One day, somehow, we're gonna make this work.
Just don't lie to anyone.
When Mark Twain talks about the, however many accents of Marion County, those are still real. Those dialects are still living and active today. And those people are still living and active today because they're direct descendants of them. So wherever you are, whether you're traveling, whether you're going around town, reimagine it as your story and then pick it apart by society. And then think of people who stick out in your mind.
And a great writing exercise to follow up on what Ryan said is as you're at, say your example, in the grocery line and you see somebody walking by, build them a story. All you can see is what they are walking by with their stuff in their cart or what they're buying in the front of you at Burger King or something like that. Build an entire story as you're getting there. I mean, it's 5 minutes or however long you've got there. Why not? It'll push your brain to try some new things.
Well,
I was going to say, if y'all don't have a snarky remark, I do.
we just looked at each
I
other
was
and...
going to say real quick, for my birthday last year, my wife got me the Skyrim soundtrack. I've been playing that game to death. I'm still playing it. And so what I'll do is I'll drive around town, I'll have it playing in my car, and suddenly, I'm not in Hannibal, I'm in a hole in Skyrim. And I don't see grocers, I see people at a mercantile. I don't see auto mechanics.
Don't kill anyone!
Don't get caught killing anyone.
Our friend Savannah has a word for that. That's
Don't
called
hurt the chickens.
That's called adventure driving.
Yeah.
It is a good way to cause an accident. You have to be very careful. But
I used to be a girl like you.
oh my goodness. I don't remember what I was gonna say.
Well, I'll
You
throw
were going to talk about something I'd said about the whole writing prompt.
Oh, writing prompt. Oh, the people
Yeah.
that
Oh,
you see.
shame.
Real quick, I would throw out-
Owen,
I thought all writers did this without having to actually write, because that's literally how
Yeah,
I walk through the grocery store.
I don't necessarily say
Yeah.
write them down. I'm just saying think about it so that you know. 'Cause
But that's literally me walking through the grocery
Yeah.
store, is picking apart
I don't
everybody.
do that. I have enough people living in my head already.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't need to look at everyone
Steve!
else.
Like before my smartphone, I was much better at observing other people and noting details. However, I am not the kind of person who's able to throw shade at people very well, because I have always had a, don't think mean things at people. It's as bad as saying them kind of thing. So sometimes I look at a person and just blank happens. And it's not always the best. I'm learning that there is some good in learning how to look at a person and read them properly. Yes. I did it once, like last week. I felt so proud.
I was so proud of her too.
It was accurate though. It was accurate.
Now, you can get a canny accurate if you're really good at it.
Yeah.
That's Chanel.
Yeah, I
She
mean,
can
if you start
read
to
a
see the
person.
way people break down, the way personalities work, and the way everything that comes around from that, I mean, you literally will start to see because we all have two faces. We have the facade that we put up in public, and we have the face that we wear underneath.
The jackal.
If you can see beyond the facade, and you can read that person, that's an amazing skill, because that has the ability then to, know things about them they may not admit to themselves.
I used to be
That show
decent at
lies
that.
me. I feel like I learned so much from watching this show.
I used to be decent at that. Chanel is really good at it. We were at Costco getting gas the other day, and we both looked at the same woman, and Chanel looked at her clothes, noticed things on her clothes that I didn't notice her watch. It was barely peeking out of her coat. She was like, "This is basically a rundown of this woman in the world." And I was like, that's so true. And I personally wouldn't have known why I thought those things about her. Like, the conclusion was, she has money, she's used to money. And I would have looked at her and been like, yes, but I wouldn't have known why. And Chanel picked out key details in the way she was dressed, the way her hair was, everything, and was like, this is why she thought this. It was totally Sherlock Holmesian.
You topic or dovetail?
No. We spent a lot of time talking about what and how. One other important dimension on character is when. Don't tell everything you know about the character
Amen.
on the first page.
Or even at all.
Perhaps
Yeah.
never at all. But certainly dribble out important information at key points when it's important to give them a little something. But always keep something in reserve that tantalizes people and keeps them reading and keeps them following your character through the entire character arc of the book. Or the series, for that matter.
Chanel and then Rob? Chanel?
Okay, so I was at WizCon this last year, and I was in a workshop that I totally just walked in on without reserving anything, but I do that.
We didn't know we were doing
But so one of the things that this amazing workshop leader said was that with backstory, imagine that you have a typewriter and you literally write out your entire backstory for this person, place, thing, whatever. In this case, for this character, you write out your entire backstory, and it comes out of the typewriter, why not, written on a sheet of glass. And then you take that glass and you shatter it. And you sprinkle this shattered glass all over your novel. Okay, that might just be me being a little morbid, but I thought that was really cool.
I really
cut
don't
your
want to
finger,
open the
dog.
pages up. Can I get some gloves for your books?
It's sugar. It's confectionery sugar.
There you go.
Sure, whatever.
Like things.
But the idea of there is backstory, there's a complete backstory somewhere, and you have literally hidden bits and pieces of it very purposefully throughout your novel, as if it was some invisible topping that only you know the wheres, whens, and whys of.
So one of my series that I write in my world is it's essentially hardboiled detective novels, but they're set in a medieval fantasy sword and sorcery world. And when I get to the end, when I get to who the bad guy is in solving the mystery, I have to make sure that there are certain cookie crumbs that get to the bad guy, so that the readers can figure out who the bad guy is, even though it's not necessarily easy. And so I'm absolutely taking those shards of glass and sprinkling them in at not necessarily specific rhythm points, but making sure that when the time comes for us to figure out who the bad guy is, we understand the motivations because the clues have been there the entire time. And one of the ways I do that is by only having 2 or 3 adjectives or adverbs related to each character in a particular scene at a time.
Kathleen, and then
I wanna take us back to an earlier point of Fedora's and Rob's about characters' strengths and weaknesses. It's good as writers to know what our characters' strengths are. It's better to also recognize what their weaknesses are, especially if the characters don't know what they are. But one of the things we read fiction for, I believe, is to watch how a character changes, to watch how they grow, or how they choose not to grow. So that's one of the reasons you would have character weaknesses, among many others, just because they're people. You want them to be like people. But when I'm writing a character, it's important for me to know, yes, what the character wants, but also how I want them to grow by the end of the story. Like Brad mentioned earlier, what we're supposed to feel about the character is something you want to show early on. For me, I also want to show how that character needs to grow early on. And then over the course of the story, with their interactions with other characters, I want to push them and challenge them and put them through a struggle, as Fedora talks about, so that by the end of the story, they make the choice whether to grow or to stagnate and stay horrible and flawed, which is an option that some people make. And I don't read those stories because they make me horribly sad. So, yeah, I just wanted to talk about character growth. You want ideally to have a character arc over the course of the story, or if it's a series.
Well, isn't that one of the definitions of literature is that the characters start in one place and become something else, and that what you're telling is that evolution. I mean, that's for me, when I design characters, as we talked about, one of the few things I do about plotting them is to put an end game for them. I don't necessarily stick to it, but I'll just write out, gonna die doing something heroic, going to fail trying, but still be able to go to it, or going to fall in love, or going to change in some way. And I may not know anything else, but I got a kind of an end game. I'm sorry I interrupted. But.
No, you're fine. Let me pause us here because we are already over the 1 hour mark.
So sorry.
No, that's all right. So, Kathleen, I think you just gave us a season 5 episode we need to follow up on, which is the evolution of the character through story. And with that, have a great week writing. Tune in next week for yet another interesting topic in the writing industry. Thank you, everyone, for listening. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery